everybody? Welcome to the show. If you're joining us live, thank you so much. It's the middle of the afternoon here. We're getting ready for the SpaceX GPS 3 Space Vehicle 3 mission. So, Space Force stuff, the Air Force's project of the GPS satellite constellation program to allow for global GPS access. It became a utility under George W. Bush. I was reading up on it. The Space Force has been very good online, on Twitter especially. That's where I typically follow them. They've been pretty good about kind of sharing, like, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? For instance, like this GPS site. Like, if you just looked at it, you're like, what the hell is GPS 3, Space Vehicle 3? I mean, they're doing a great job. I really like what the Space Force is doing. I also enjoy the hilarity on the internet that is the Space Force and how people are running it. The show Space Force, I don't know if any of you guys have been watching that. I enjoyed it. I've heard mixed reviews from people, especially fans of The Office. I enjoyed it. It started off really stupid, which you kind of expected it to because it's a comedy. But no, I enjoyed it. Did anyone else watch that? It was good. I hope this is second season. It was good enough for me. The launch for today is aboard a Falcon 9. It's going to be delivering, like we said, the GPS 3 satellite, which is a Lockheed Martin satellite. Lockheed Martin was the company that was picked by the Air Force back in the day when they started this. The GPS system, they've had, this is the third series of these satellites they're putting out for localized GPS. And it's really interesting to see how much involvement, like, the Air Force and just the military has in space, and why something like the Space Force makes sense. I know it's one of those things that a lot of people are like, why do we even have a Space Force? We're not trying to fight a war in space. But they're setting up this infrastructure in space to allow us to have things like GPS. Now, I can still get lost here. The GPS still isn't great, but things like this is the reason we have that kind of stuff. So, again, Lockheed Martin was the company that was hired to make these satellites for the Air Force. The Space Force is now taking over part of what the Air Force was doing in space. We've got launch in about 20 minutes. The weather is still about 60%. We're waiting for that to happen. We'll see what SpaceX does. They've already pushed it from 3:55 to 4:10, which I think was the end of their launch window. It was only about 15 minutes that they were 15-minute launch window, so this could very easily get scrubbed. So I've definitely brought along a few things to talk about, to chat about. Hey Rick, what's going on, man? Thank you for joining. We'll see. I mean, first of all, the world is crazy, so this is kind of our moment to kind of get away from all that and see what's going on, see a rocket launch, and just hang out with you guys. Anything interesting going on, let me know. Hit me up in the chat. Let me know what you're doing. I am doing things to keep myself sane, as I'm sure most of us are trying to do. So, a lot of things we're doing. We're 3D printing a lot. Obviously, if you've seen our Instagram page, AG3D Printing, we've been making a bunch of things like these PS4 stands. We've had people who are gaming in the summer. They don't want their PS4s to overheat, so they asked for stands for their PS4. We made stands for their PS4. We did the horizontal ones first. These with these little clips here. Clip right into the side of the PS4. Keep it up a little bit so you get a little airflow going underneath the PS4. And then someone wanted a vertical stand. And that's what we did. We built a vertical stand. So these are out there. We've got people putting them on their PlayStations in their homes. Thank you for hitting up our Etsy store. Supporting us how you can. That is ag3dprinting.etsy.com. That is our shop where we have our high quality 3D printed goods. And we're open to, we make stuff all the time from complete scratch. So if there's something you're looking for and you think other people would like to, let us know and we'll see what we can do. That's what we do with AG3D. So one of the other things, we've talked about this before, the face masks that we were working on. We've tried a bunch of different things. We've got our combo of hard plastic and flexible plastic. We've had some test runs. We're still working out the kinks there, but that's what we like doing. I like being hands-on to get my mind off of things. Tinkerer. That's just how I am. And we also have our rocket project, which we're working on this summer. Basically, if you guys haven't heard about it already, that's great, Rick. I'm so glad Cindy's got that. One of our rocket ship phone stands that we use. Actually, I have my phone on one right now. This is our new version that I believe Cindy has as well. It actually has rockets on the bottom. You can put your phone on it. I use mine all the time. I couldn't, I literally, my phone would just be falling over all the time. It's nice to have that nice, simple stand, put your phone on, and just not have to worry about your phone in one position. Especially good when you're talking to people, especially FaceTime or something like that on the phone. But even like in this case, I'm using it just so I can look at the chat while we're hanging out here. And that's what this thing is. This is just a launch hangout. We're waiting. We've got another 17 minutes until the 4:10 launch. Again, I think it's the end of the launch window. So if the weather holds up, the payload looks good, the rocket's fueled. So we're just waiting to see if they're going to get the go for weather. They were high crosswinds, so obviously further up they go, you don't really want high winds when the rocket's ripping through the atmosphere like that. It's not good for that rocket to survive. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, no one wants to lose their payload. That's millions of dollars down the toilet. But this rocket, if everything goes well, they will attempt to recover the rocket. Let's pull up our little stats here for our live. Oh, look at that. So the launch provider for today, obviously, is SpaceX. They're going to be using their Falcon 9, their first stage rocket. The customer is the Space Force. Again, we talked about it a little bit before. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Everyone else who has already, say hi in the chat. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to share what I can. But the Space Force is the customer here. So they hired SpaceX to deliver the satellite that they hired Lockheed Martin to build. The GPS system, it's a tangled web, the space industry. Very tangled. So the Space Force is taking over for the Air Force that was running this program in the first place. And they're going to slowly start doing more and more of that as they start transitioning with Space Force taking on more role and more of the operations that they can do as they get more people. The payload, as we said again, is the third space vehicle for GPS-3, which is the current iteration of GPS satellites that they're maintaining. They will try and recover that first stage rocket on the autonomous spaceport drone ship Just Read the Instructions, which is going to be floating. I think they crossed because, here we go. We've got SpaceX is finally ready to start their broadcast. We'll lower this down. But yeah, so obviously we were going to have the Starlink launch not that long ago. Starlink launch got postponed. They couldn't launch on time. So that meant that the drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, that was already out in the ocean, came back and ended up passing by this drone ship, Just Read the Instructions, as it was going back out to sea. So there's this whole operation behind the scene, this like sea recovery operation that they do. It's amazing that SpaceX has changed the whole industry and has made it so that recovering rockets is this kind of usual thing. It's almost become routine at this point, which is hilarious to say that a rocket landing and recovering itself to be reused is boring at this point. But honestly, I think that's the horse and pony show that people show up for a lot of these launches, because it's new, it's something different. And that's what SpaceX has been doing great at, not only from a rocket perspective and saving people money, because obviously if you can recover that rocket, that means you don't have to buy all the parts to build a completely new one again. You just gotta basically patch it up and fuel it. That's more or less your cost, which is changing the industry completely. It's changing how people are thinking about going to space. It's one of the reasons why the Space Force is having SpaceX be a launch provider of this. If you look back, the GPS satellites that have been around for years at this point, decades, they've gone to different providers over time, and SpaceX is slowly taking little bits of the industry and different aspects of going into space, delivering payloads into space. And a lot of those companies that are losing those contracts are going to be picking them up, or are going to be changing their complete strategy. We saw that Tory Bruno is turning the ship of the United Launch Alliance, which is a huge launch provider for the United States. A lot of history with the United Launch Alliance. They do a lot of things that SpaceX can't do with just Falcon 9. One of the things that they're trying to do is really get to the point where they have a fully American rocket, and that's the Vulcan Centaur that's going to be built here in a little bit. But even they're adjusting. So here now with the broadcast, I'm going to stop talking here for a little bit. We're going to hear what's going on, and let me know if you have any questions in the chat. I'm here to hang out. We're here to watch a launch and have some fun. So here we go.
Space Vehicle number 3 launch for the United States Space Force. Now, the Global Positioning System, or GPS payload, is one that you're probably familiar with. GPS satellites provide a diverse range of positioning and timing services for both civil and military purposes. Now, the United States has been launching GPS satellites for the last 42 years, and today marks the 75th launch. This launch is also particularly special.
It's just crazy how long this has been going on.
In memory of Colonel Thomas Falzarano, commander of the 21st Space Wing, Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado. The Space Force has dedicated this mission to his memory, and we will hear directly from General Raymond and others who knew and worked with him just before we enter into the first coast phase later on in the broadcast.
You know, one of the interesting things, the Space Force has done a really good job of being, in my opinion, of being this, next generation. They're not just a military branch. Like, I'm learning more from following them on Twitter than I learned from most space companies. So it's really interesting. It's very, very interesting to see the Space Force kind of be this modern branch of the military so quickly. Like, they're brand new, and already they're very vocal online. I think they're doing a great job. And General Raymond, I think, is, from what I'm seeing on the outside, I know nothing of the guy other than the fact that he is the Space Force general, that I think he's doing a great job. I've been on a few different things. The Space Foundation live stream they had a little while ago, he was really good on that. The fact that, he worked with the show Space Force that was on Netflix to make that happen, and they're cool with it, and they're laughing it off. Like, I don't know. That to me is just a good show of somebody's good leadership. He's not too uptight. That's great. And he seems like a cool dude. So.
The apogee, or the highest point of that orbit, will ultimately end up at about 20,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface, at which point the satellite will then separate and then perform some burns to enter into a circular medium Earth orbit about 20,200 kilometers above the Earth.
All right, so we got about 11 minutes before launch. Again, if you have any questions, let me know in the chat. But yeah, we have been working on our own stuff here. To say that 2020 has been a dumpster fire of a year, I think, is an understatement. One of the things I wanted to do this summer, not only for my own mental health, because, like I said before, I'm a tinkerer. Working with my hands clears my mind. It's my own version of meditation. We came up with this idea to do the rocket project, which is an idea that came from you guys, listeners of our show. Steve, thank you for that. I think it's a great idea, and we talked about it in our last episode a lot. Just a quick side note, what they're showing here are the recovery ships for the fairings. The fairings being if we look up here, these are the pieces that are encasing the spacecraft as it goes into orbit to go through all that atmosphere, all that air, all that friction that's going to happen. It makes the rocket more aerodynamic, but then they get rid of them when it goes into orbit because you don't need it anymore. And plus, you need to get the spacecraft out into space. So it's just more weight that you're carrying around. So they dump these. And just like everything, every part of the rocket over the years that we've been doing since the rocket has been used, it's just been dumping this rocket every time we use it, which is super expensive. And so what SpaceX is slowly doing is recovering each part of the rocket. They've obviously done the first stage, which is a huge part of recovery and cutting the cost of going into space. But fairing recovery has never been done before. And those are very expensive pieces. A lot of the time they're carbon fiber. And to make something that big in a mold with carbon fiber, it's a big cost on top of what you have to pay to go into orbit. So if they can recover these things, then everyone will reap the benefits of that. The people that are going to space, like in this case, the Space Force, they're going to make use of flying on a reusable rocket. They're gonna save the money, and if they can recover these fairings, everyone saves even more. Let me see here. We got a question in this chat. is there a change in, oh, if there is a change in regime in November, do you see Space Force continuing on? That's a really good question, Rick. And it's definitely not unheard of that with a change in the White House comes a change in the space industry. In fact, the space industry has been plagued by that for many years. We've talked about it before on the podcast. With the end of the space shuttle came the start of the Constellation program, which you probably never heard of, which was our return to the moon, but it cost so much money just to get a robot back to the moon that they basically said, nope, cut it, it's too expensive, let's not do this. During the Obama administration years, they tried the asteroid recovery program, which again got cut. You probably haven't heard of it. And then he also was very instrumental with the administrator at the time, Charles Bolden, who was a space shuttle astronaut. They put together the commercial resupply mission, the commercial crew, which is what happened recently with that Demo 2 launch with astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. That happened because the Obama administration put into place this commercial crew program. Luckily, we didn't flip-flop and completely change the space program. We kept continuing it with this administration. But given this administration, it's possible that there could just be, if it does change in the White House and people want to change everything that was being done before, yeah, it's possible. But I think the Space Force has already started. I think it would be very expensive to stop the Space Force. And this mission is very important for the Space Force to kind of claim their ground in are they worthy. They're taking over Air Force operations with this launch. This is their first version of this because the Air Force, again, we've talked about it before, but if you're just joining us, the Air Force was doing these GPS satellites, 40-something years that they've been doing this. Now the Space Force is taking this over. It becomes a lot harder for, the next administration to say, hey, we don't want this. Get rid of it. So it could happen. It could totally happen. It's not impossible, but it's a great question. Thank you, Rick. If you have any other questions, please let me know. Going back to the broadcast here. Let's see where we're at.
More about today's satellites.
Oh, okay, so Lockheed Martin's going to tell us about the satellites.
We use GPS every day.
Today, everyone has GPS technology in their pocket.
$300 billion a year.
25 years of space-based position, navigation, and timing, supporting the entire world.
GPS touches the lives of everyday people all the time. It's changed the way we work. It's changed the way
fisheye.
we play with over 4 billion users worldwide. We're already preparing for the next generation of GPS satellites with our GPS 3 follow-on contract, and we're inserting greater technology for greater capability.
So again, if you guys are just joining us or just new to this, SpaceX is launching for the Space Force, which is launching satellites that Lockheed Martin built for the Air Force. Again, a lot of parties involved, more than you'd ever think. But, this kind of GPS satellite, I think a lot of people think, like, what is the space industry? Like, what is it doing for us? This is one of the few examples where this launch is actively going to affect our daily lives. So we've got about 4 minutes and 15 seconds to launch. Again, we're going to go live earlier this week for the Starlink launch, which didn't happen. We'll try and see if the timing works out for us to go live for another one of those and hang out there. But it's interesting because, like, Starlink is not using anything that's completely new as far as an idea, like a constellation. This GPS satellite, these GPS 3 spacecraft, like, these are part of a constellation that will, have a certain orbit so that they can provide GPS to not only the civil sector like you and I, but also the military side of things. Those constellations are not very big, and I'm more asking and posing the question, like, what is the main difference here with a satellite like this versus the satellites that are going up for Starlink, which would provide global internet, especially to the places in the world that don't get it or don't have the ability to get it. Obviously, the major difference with Starlink there is that originally it was 40,000 satellites they were going to be launching. And I know there's a lot of people who have reached out to me, and there's a lot of people talking about it online, where they're seeing these trains of SpaceX satellites. It's a touchy subject, obviously, because the Earth-based astronomy, people looking at the stars from the ground, once those 40,000 satellites get up there, it's definitely going to have an impact on astronomy and when it's possible for us to take pictures from the Earth. But at the same time, these satellites have been around for a long time. There are other companies behind SpaceX that have been working on it a lot longer than SpaceX has to put up these large global internet satellites. It's just that SpaceX not only can build the Starlink satellite, they can also build the rocket to bring it up there. So obviously they can move a lot faster. So it's interesting. I'm definitely, if you guys know anything or have any good info on the good or the bad of the effects of Starlink on astronomy, please let me know. We could definitely do an episode on it. One of the things we're working on right now, we've got another launch coming up here later this month. Actually, this summer there's a lot of launches to Mars and a lot of different countries. I think the United Arab Emirates are launching their first mission to Mars. I believe India is also. And then the U.S., NASA is launching their 2020 Mars rover, Perseverance. So we're going to have an orbital news segment for you guys so we can talk more about what's on board, the science behind it, all the different stuff that's led up to this point, and kind of what to look forward to. So you kind of have a companion podcast for when that launch actually happens. You'll have a lot of good info so that you know a little bit more about it and you can get a little more excited about it. So we're working on that. We should have that out, I think it's next week. But that's it, folks. We got a minute to launch. Let's tune in. Looks like launches go.
Startup. AFTS configured for flight.
Launch director is announced. We're inside of a minute. We are in startup on the flight computers.
Here we
are
go.
also beginning to pressurize stage 1 and stage 2 for launch.
Mission directors go for launch.
Go, people. We'll go.
We've heard the final call-outs.
All right.
Mission director, launch director.
So again, like we talked about, we've got a launch coming up. We've got a first stage recovery, and they will, like they've been trying for a while here, they will try and launch and land and recover safely the fairings with those basically giant catcher mitts on boats, which one of them is called Miss Tree, but all these things you can definitely look up. 15, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go.
Ignition.
We've got launch.
Go Falcon, go GPS.
All right. Falcon 9 pulling up off the pad. GPS 3, Space Vehicle 3 on board for the Space Force. Here we go. All right, so first major standpoint here. We've gotten off the launch pad. That's great. We've got to make it through max Q, which is the max aerodynamic pressure, the max amount of forces that the rocket is going to experience as it's going out of the atmosphere, because that rocket needs to be aerodynamic to rip through the atmosphere. All those particles of air that it's going through, max Q is where all those forces are the worst, the vibrations of the rocket and the force that's behind these things. Max Q is one of those big standpoints of, are we okay? It's still not over till not only is the rocket landed safely, but also the original reason we're doing this mission, right? The satellite going into orbit. That needs to happen. That's a successful mission. Now, max Q's coming up here. Again, we talked about it. The fairing recovery is a big aspect of today's mission. Landing on an autonomous spaceport drone ship. Just read the instructions in the middle of the Atlantic. We're waiting for that. But we are almost at max Q. Here we are.
Guidance engineer calls out max Q, the period of maximum dynamic pressure, or Q, on the vehicle. From this point forward,
and I know, obviously, now with COVID and all this stuff that's going on, it's tough to make a trip down to Florida or to California or wherever, even over in Virginia. We've got the middle of the East Coast. We've got some launches going on. If you can see a rocket launch, please go take the time. Take a moment just to experience the insanity of the engineering and the marvel of an actual rocket launch. There's so much a feeling, of an actual being there aspect of a rocket launch. As exciting as it is to sit here and hang out and do a launch, being there for a launch is so much more exciting, and it's an experience. So if you haven't, it's definitely worth it. If once things get back to normal, or whatever normal is, that's definitely something you should put on your list. We talked about it. Our NASA Social, we went down in December of 2019, right before all this stuff happened, to the CRS-19 mission for SpaceX, resupplying the International Space Station. That was my first one, and I cannot wait to go to another. Literally going to be planning my year around at least one launch just to get my fix of that. Okay, main engine cutoff. First stage is released from the second stage engine, which has just ignited the vacuum Merlin engines that are built specifically to ignite in the vacuum of space. That's just released. That's going to deliver the GPS-3 space vehicle to its proper orbit, and then release the satellite there.
Then slowly turn around and descend back to the drone ship for landing in the Atlantic Ocean. The second stage engine beginning the long burn to get it into the parking orbit.
Acquisition of signal, Maryland.
Coming
All
up,
right.
fairing deploy.
So we talked about the fairings before. So here is the fairing deploy here. You can actually see here, this is the view from inside. The fairings separate. Now we've got our spacecraft open. We're out of the atmosphere. We don't need the fairings anymore. Dump those things. Now remember, those have never been recovered. There has not been a successful full recovery of this, even for SpaceX. I think they've only gotten one out of the two, but getting both has not happened. And it's a pretty crazy dance that they do to get these things back. On board the fairings, they have their own parachutes, and they're going to basically come back down to Earth, and then the ships are trying to match up with these fairings as they come in. So there's wind involved, there's currents from the sea. How fast can these drone ships reposition themselves to pick up these fairings? There is a lot involved in catching this, and it's just something they haven't figured out yet. But they've made the investment. They've got two ships, one for each fairing that they're going to try and recover. That's amazing how much it is a fleet of naval craft as much as it is, launching something into space. There's so much involved in this. So they're gonna try and attempt that. Hopefully we'll get some kind of footage. They did show the two vehicles at sea earlier in the broadcast. I'm gonna pull up the broadcast audio just so we can see here what's going on. About 5 minutes into launch.
It re-enters into Earth's atmosphere. Beautiful views of the planet beneath both the first stage
That
and
it
the
is.
second stage. Second stage is continuing into its burn. We're expecting this burn
Both
to
vehicles
last
continue to
about
follow nominal
5
trajectories.
minutes and 15 seconds. And entry burn will actually begin on the first stage in just about a minute from now. During the entry burn, will ignite.
So entry burn, the vehicle is coming back. The first stage vehicle that we released earlier, you can see on the left there, that's going to do its own entry burn. Basically, get it so that the spacecraft can slow down a little bit, reduce its speed so that it doesn't hit the atmosphere with tremendous force and hit all those air particles as it's coming in. I think the visual that anyone who's seen the space shuttle, as that space shuttle capsule, anything re-entering the atmosphere, you see that red glow that happens as it hits the atmosphere coming back in. They need to do this burn to make sure that the rocket doesn't blow up on the way back down.
Continues to burn towards that elliptical orbit.
And those little white bursts that you see come out of the left on the first stage of the Falcon 9, those are thrusters to reposition. Up here comes our entry burn, and once you're in space, it's all about momentum. So you need to have those tiny thrusters on there to reorient, to get yourself into the right position. Obviously, in this case, to put the thrust of the engine for the reentry burn in the right position so that you can actually achieve the slowdown that you're looking for.
Stage 1, entry burn, shut down.
And you can see, like, even after the burn, nothing's perfect. You're always in this kind of just getting it. You're always on the line of what is the minimum window, like the narrow band of success for this rocket to come back in. And and having the ability and what they've done with this rocket, just seeing it develop over the years has been so wild. The engineers that have been behind this, that have made this possible, kudos to all of you. You've done literally the impossible. And the cool thing is that this could have happened and none of us would have seen any of this stuff. That's one of the beautiful things that SpaceX has done, is they've completely reshaped how you do a broadcast for going into space. It's crazy. And so we see the view on the left here of the autonomous spaceport drone ship. Just read the instructions. It's going to be landing pretty soon here, according to the chart on the bottom. And we're also going to have second engine cut off at the same time.
Watch for that on your left-hand screen.
All right. We're getting close. First stage coming in hot. Coming in hot.
Church at AOS. Stage 1 landing burn is starting.
Hey, Sharon.
Ignition of that center Merlin engine on the first stage.
All right, here we go.
Successful confirmation.
First stage coming in.
The Merlin vacuum
Oh,
engine.
here we go. Little vibration.
Engineers evaluating the
Air shaking from all that force of that thruster. Here comes the entry burn. Landing burn. Oh, here we go. Oh. I think we got it.
And
Looks
stage
like
1
a
is landed.
successful landing.
Recovery operator.
Woo!
First stage. So
Yeah.
it's,
Dude,
first fluke.
how has this become routine? How has landing a rocket become routine? It's just freaking insane. So they've successfully landed their rocket on a barge in the middle of the ocean. That rocket, once it comes back safely, will be able to be reflown as long as nothing else was, tremendously shaken up or anything like that. The distortion that you saw on the video there, to the best of my knowledge, what's happening there is that the force of that engine as that's coming back in for that landing burn is literally shaking up the air so much that the connection is getting cut off. So when that happens, it's almost always, of course, it's almost always at the point where it's landing. Of course, that doesn't help people on the internet that say things are fake, because of course that is the that is the exact same time. But to the best of my knowledge, that is what's happening there. And look, we have issues going through. We have issues going straight through. Oh, hold on, General John Raymond's coming in to talk about this. Let's get.
As a former commander of the 45th Operations Group, Tom not only understood the critical importance of our launch capabilities here on the Eastern Range, but he dedicated his entire military career
Smalls.
to ensure our nation's space
What's up, man?
capabilities like GPS continue to fuel our modern way of life and our modern way of war.
Is the general of the Space
Incredible
Force, people.
officer, leader, father, and friend who made a difference. He was in his prime
Hi, Sharon.
as he led the 21st Space Wing at Peterson Air Force Base at such a critical point in our nation's history. Before that, he served as my senior executive officer, who worked tirelessly behind the scenes.
So I'll tell you guys
put in long
more about the
hours
45th
as we
Space Wing
established
once we're done
United
here.
States Space Command, our nation's 11th Combatant Command, and the United States Space Force, our newest branch of the Armed Services.
Also signal Maryland's
Tom
expected.
made a difference in the lives of his teammates and those he led. He will always be remembered for caring for his people while taking care of the mission. Tom had that unique gift of connecting with everyone he came in contact with. He always had a smile and a word of encouragement, no matter how demanding the situation was. Tom made a difference in the lives of his family. No one loved family more than he did. And in fact, Tom made us all feel like we were part of his family. As we watch today's Falcon 9 soar high into space, let Tom's legacy be a reminder for all of us to make a difference every single day, and how our greatest legacy is found in the relationships and the investments we make in the people around us. My sincere thanks to SpaceX, the 45th Space Wing, and the entire launch team for honoring Tom's legacy.
Nobody knew how much the United States...
And that is General John J. Raymond, who is the general of the Space Force right now. So they dedicated this launch to Tom, as they were talking about. who helped lead the 45th Space Wing, which is an integral part, especially in the Kennedy Space Center, for making sure that these operations go well. You know, we learned a lot about the 45th Space Wing when SpaceX had an explosion on the launch pad. I believe it was the one that blew up on the launch pad during fueling that had the Facebook satellite that was supposed to deliver internet to underprivileged areas around the world. And that was a specific thing because the 45th Space Wing has to go in there when everything goes to shit. But they're also intimately involved to make things go almost flawlessly. So in that case where SpaceX had the anomaly on the launch pad back in, I think it was 2018, they had to make sure that everyone that got in there was safe. You know, there's a lot of fuel that is not safe to breathe. And when that thing blew up on the launch pad, they had to literally take footage. They had drones fly over to check where everything was positioned to make sure that the team that was going in there to address the payload, to address the launch pad itself, that they were safe. So the 45th Space Wing, little unknown for the common folk that just kind of just like, hey, I like space. They're honoring the leader of the 45th Space Wing that passed away, and they honored him with this launch. I'm sure this will be up online earlier because I've definitely talked over most of this. But that's it, guys. We've got a rocket that has landed once again. SpaceX doing all the stuff that they do and more. It's weird to see, you know, that landing rockets is becoming normal. What's happening? I don't know, but I don't know much in the days of COVID-19 and where we are in the world today. So thank you guys for joining us. I really appreciate it. We're gonna hang out here a little bit longer just to see how the mission turns out. Again, the mission's not over until the payload is delivered into orbit successfully. We get a little bit of fun with hanging out, seeing a rocket land, so that's always fun. But I'll listen a little bit into the words
564th Missile Squadron in Great Falls, Montana.
Of, you know,
Tom is the kind of
here we go.
person who would do whatever he could to help another airman. He looked out for the folks that he led, and he looked out for his peers. And it was my privilege for the time that we were serving as wing commanders together to serve next to him. Chief?
Sir, I had the pleasure of working with Colonel Falzarano as a teammate in Air Force Space Command headquarters. Consummate professional, consummate leader. You're missed, sir.
We're going to miss you, Tom.
It is so fitting that we as an Air and Space Force remember Colonel Tom Falzarano with his GPS launch. Tom spent a lot of time in Florida, and in particular, as the 45th Operations Group Commander, he sat on crew for many of our nation's most important launches. Tom was truly a people person who loved his airmen and enjoyed hearing their stories. He was caring and kind to everyone he met and always found time to brag about his family. To Stacy and the children, it is our honor to represent the 14,000 men and women of Team Buckley and honor Tom for his leadership and service to this nation. For many of us who personally knew him, we'll light a cigar in his honor after a successful launch. Here's a toast.
Damn, big loss.
It's my pleasure, along with other leaders of the United States Space Force, to honor the life of Colonel Tom Falzarano during the SpaceX Falcon 9 launch of the next GPS satellite. Colonel Falzarano is a former commander of the 45th Operations Group, and his legacy is felt throughout the Eastern Range. We have a saying in the 45th Space Wing: once a shark, always a shark. And the sharks of the wing are so sad to hear of the passing of Colonel Falzarano. We'd also like to pass on our condolences and tell Stacy and the children that our thoughts and prayers are with them. Falsey, I just want to say thank you for your many years of friendship to me personally, and to your many years of service to the United States and the United States Space Force.
Damn, son.
You left us too young. You are and will continue to be missed. Thank you.
Damn. Colonel Thomas G. Falzarano, man. There's so many people behind these launches. I mean, especially when we have astronauts, human beings that are going into space, it's easy to have a face on who's going into space. But there's so many people behind the scenes, literally a village, to just launch one mission into space. And the various space wings that are out there for the Air Force, now the Space Force. There's all these people. There's a whole group of people that you wouldn't even know about. And so obviously we wish Falzarano family all the best and Godspeed to Colonel Falzarano. But that's it, folks. I think that's what we're gonna end it there. We've got the rocket project going on here. We are 3D printing our own rocket. We will be testing that out this summer. The weather's got to get a little bit better out here in Massachusetts. We've had insane thunderstorms and extreme weather, sleet, hail, thunder, and lightning that shakes a house. It's been wild. Dealing with flooding and things like that. So be safe. My hometown is complete flooding. It was absolutely wild. But we are going to be working on the rocket project. We want you guys to get involved. We're doing this to do this all together, right? So one of the things I did, because of people like you that have reached out, the people that know about model rockets, have done it before. This is my first time. But we picked up an Estes Alpha 3 flying model. It's a beginner rocket. This is something, especially if you want to do this, if you have kids, or if you just want to do it yourself, this is a great place to start. It comes with the launch pad, the igniter, the parachute. So it comes with everything you need to get it started. $25 on Amazon. It's really, really cheap just to get started. But that's where we're going to start. We're going to make a 3D printed rocket. We're going to buy the engines and try and do the same. Try and match and see if we can make a 3D printed rocket that can do the same as a simple rocket like this. We're looking for you guys to help us name that rocket, and then we're going to slowly develop over time here. We're going to be, with this model rocket project for this summer, we're going to be basically seeing how far we can go with this. So we want you to get involved. If you go to our website, todayinspace.net/rocketproject2020, that's where we've got a form where you can help us name the rocket. So we're going to get a bunch of names together. We've already got 3 of them already. We're looking for more, and then we're going to have a vote later this week. We're going to be sharing the basics of what is a model rocket, what is a rocket in general, what is rocket science. We're going to be sharing a lot of that. I'm learning at the same time. It's been a lot of fun. Again, thank you, Steve, our listener and friend, for reaching out and sharing that idea. It's a great idea. Check that out, AG3D Printing on Instagram. AG3D-printing.com for any of your 3D printing needs. See what we're doing there. And then, of course, Today in Space Pod on Instagram and Twitter, and Today in Space Podcast on Facebook, where you watch this live, and on Today in Space on TikTok. That's it, folks. Don't forget our Spotify playlist. The Space Mix is available. So it's a bunch of songs from space that have some kind of influence in space or science, including some of the music that happened from some of the famous launches, including the music that astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley listened to on their way to the launch pad. That's it, folks. Be good, be well. We'll be back the week after for our orbital news segment on the Mars 2020 rover that should launch anywhere in this month and next month. That's the kind of the window that we have to launch to Mars efficiently. So they are on track. NASA says that they're still good, and so we wish them luck. Do what you can to stay sane, be safe, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Today in Space.